Hello, my name is Dwayne Stradford, NERC Compliance Director here at TRC. I'm here to talk to Dr. Green today about achieving operational excellence in the NERC compliance space and also the best practices to apply and deploy at your company. So as we move forward in the industry, we see a lot of emerging events happening. We see a lot of new technologies coming on board. We have the large load with the data centers coming online. We have a lot of engagement with renewable companies that are looking to develop more wind, solar, battery storage sites on the grid. And then that also comes with some new NERC registered functions with the geo, generator owner, inverter-based resource, and generator operator inverter-based resource. So what are some of the things that you see that we can do from an IPA standpoint in supporting those customers going down that corridor?
Sure, Dwayne. Yeah, so we have this interesting mix of some of the largest loads, if not the largest loads that the U.S. electric system has ever seen, in excess of 1,000 megawatts per site. And we're also seeing continued and unprecedented growth of distributed energy resources, which in aggregate are operating in some cases as wholesale energy assets as well. And then at the same time, we have this unprecedented infrastructure investment that's needed to address either these two changes or aging assets and other factors, including just regular investments that we need to make on the system. So there's a significant amount of change taking place overall in the industry. And I forgot to mention, but we are still seeing a rise of both cyber and physical threats that take place in our system, and growing concern of combined threats, including cyber-physical attacks that are taking place in our system. So a couple of observations I'd make. First of all, there are hardline criteria for many entities as to whether or not they need to consider being compliant with NERC CIP. And I think that those individuals, those organizations need to strongly consider making the compliance-ready decisions at the onset of their projects, because it's highly likely that the assets that they're building or operating are going to end up having to be adherent to some form or another of NERC or NERC-like standards going into the future. So I suspect, number one, that those lines are highly likely to change. And the mindset that organizations who are building energy assets on the U.S. electric grid need to maintain is, what's the right thing to build and to do from the perspective of building a resilient and secure electric system, and not, do I need to be compliant or don't I need to be compliant? Right. With large loads in particular, we are seeing an unprecedented impact of these loads that are now coming to the system and the impact that they're having on the bulk electric system. So I don't think we've conventionally thought of having 1,000 megawatt plus loads that can be somewhat fickle with regard to power quality and come on and offline very, very quickly. Loads that are as large as major cities. I expect that those entities are going to have increased scrutiny and are going to need to think about how they can be better consumers and better partners with U.S. electric infrastructure. On the distributed side, we are increasingly seeing threats of coordinated energy attacks that are consistent with the opportunities we're also seeing from coordinated energy benefits. And so I think we need to look at this combination of how these assets can best help support and enable improved efficiency, reliability, and resilience on the grid at the same time that we're managing threats that these assets are providing for us. So same thing, I think we're going to expect to see that those assets are going to increasingly be under scrutiny and potentially be adherent to some form of compliance or regulatory standards going in the future. And then for everybody who's out there as an existing operator underneath NERC CIP guidance, all of those entities need to think about what these new assets ultimately are going to do from their perspective on how do they securely and compliantly operate all that equipment too. You mentioned earlier, Dwayne, this idea of managing handoffs between different organizations. There are now an increasing number of organizations that those handoffs are going to will be taking place just because of the volume and uptick of all these new entities on the system. And just want to reinforce the conversation we had earlier is how critical it is to maintain a culture of being a learning organization, how critical it is to be a culture that's focused on human performance at the core and building operational excellence and building rigor in our processes in ways that are repeatable.
Yeah, and I think down that corridor, we've talked about proactive anticipation, right? And we talked about NERC CIP. And a lot of it comes down to foundational information and foundational blocking and tackling. Make sure the data is there, make sure your foundation for compliance is there. And how do we strategically help our clients build in those core tasks and activities? Like, say, for instance, the NERC CIP low impact list is not right now a requirement, but they've been talking about it over the last 3 or 4 versions of CIP 3. How do we encourage and inspire our clients to start proactively anticipating? They have to start doing that work now before it becomes a full requirement. And then how do we strategically put workflows, checkpoints, action items into direct and indirect workflows to just steadily progress in developing that list?
Sure. With regard to trying to help encourage clients to take a look at this as a whole, the good news is that there are already special incentives for NERC adherent entities to be proactive with regard to investments in this space. So, I'm actually really happy that these standards have regulations that allow for that. So, if you're not already aware of that and you have NERC compliance obligations, there's a significant likelihood already that there are already financial incentives for you to be proactive with regard to your investments you're making in this space. So that's number one. The second thing I would say is that, as I've mentioned before, the vast majority of misoperations that have taken place on the bulk electric system are due to human performance and fundamentally due to operational issues that took place. And organizations that perform well with regard to compliance, in particular in NERC CIP, have statistically better reliability performance as a whole, and almost always statistically perform better financially than their peers too. So the financial incentive to be compliant is directly correlated to financial outcomes for firms that are doing that.
And I think the more we go down that corridor of showing by being more proactive and self-initiating this work, that is a regulatory obligation, and there is rate recovery for that, as opposed to being fined, having an incident. So there's 2 financial aspects to kind of talk about. One, do we share with our clients about you don't get recovery for penalties when you do get fined in this space? And then the volume of O&M that goes along with tracking an incident, doing the investigation, the self-report, the mitigation plan. Those are all hours that are not focused on the job, but actually trailing for a negative outcome.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it is far better to be proactive and to build excellent compliance programs than to be reactive and to wait for bad stuff to happen. I think about this a little bit. I have quite a few friends and family members that own boats, and I know we were talking about this a bit earlier, but there's a running joke. The boats are pretty expensive to maintain and to manage, and it can be regarded as a bit of a money pit. And the worst outcome, I think, for a boat owner is somebody who is 80% into boat ownership. What they end up with is something that they probably can't enjoy, but they're still spending 80% of their investment in it. And that's the analog that I would use in CIP compliance. Ultimately, if you need to be adherent to CIP and you're following the minimum possible necessary steps to be adherent to CIP, you're taking an enormous risk as an entity, as an individual firm. And the reality is that these standards are here for a reason. They're directly tied to the stability and reliability of the bulk electric system, and it is far better, as I said already, economically and just overall from a reliability perspective to be proactive and to build enduring systems for compliance. One other thing I'll add in this area too, and this is an upside opportunity, but we are also living in the digital era. And all of us as consumers are experiencing the profound changes that are taking place due to technology. And this space is just another space that has serious opportunities to leverage that technology to operate differently. We've seen tremendous innovation. There are countless vendors that we're working with in this space that are offering new digital-oriented solutions and AI-powered solutions to help improve tracking, reporting, and operational processes associated to NERC, CIP, compliance activities as a whole, and that these opportunities can help improve outcomes at lower cost for our clients.
Everything that we do from a NERC compliance standpoint, or everything that we do from a TRC standpoint when we engage with our clients out in the field, out in the bulk electric system, has NERC compliance implications and impacts. And how do we help evaluate whether or not folks are really embedding NERC compliance action items and checkpoints into their day-to-day policies, procedures, and guidelines when they're out in the field? Because again, we don't want them to go back and think of compliance as a part-time job or a second job you do on the side. We want to integrate it into the job, just like with safety.
Right. That's a great example. And compliance, and in fact, I've used that same example, that to me, maintaining compliance is very similar to maintaining safety. You may have a safety organization, you may have a compliance organization, but ultimately at the end of the day, maintaining compliance is ultimately a function of your entire workforce and your entire team being aligned towards that outcome. And that's the people, of course, that we discussed, but also the processes and technology that ultimately support that. And what is really required to really sustain an enduring organization that is focused on compliance is having a culture of continuous learning and having a culture that's focused on operational excellence. And those two items are going to provide better performance for your organization as a whole. There are plenty of tools out there, and some of which we use for clients to help them assess their overall culture of either security or of continuous learning, and plenty of tools out there to help improve clients on pathways to improve outcomes in those spaces. But for me, similar to safety, if we can focus on those two outcomes of building ultimately enduring cultures around operational excellence and on learning, we'll be able to help support our clients in producing better outcomes as a whole.
Well, again, we've had a great discussion here today in Lancaster, and appreciate you, Dr. Green, for the words of wisdom and words of encouragement and advisement. And again, we definitely look forward to future engagements with our clients as we further expand our NERC compliance footprint.
Thanks for inviting me, Dwayne. It was great to be here, and fantastic to be here at TRC's training lab, where we're so well positioned to help support our clients in their NERC strategies and journeys as a whole.